organized manner. Very slow, methodical, not aggressive, trying to avoid that at all costs. To your point, it's a volatile situation.
Go ahead. Yeah, it is a volatile situation, and I just wanted to cut in and say that just a few minutes ago, we're hearing from the police chief down in San Jose, where protests were there earlier. Just a few minutes ago, he tweeted, "We're angry as well, and we've made that clear. We've allowed peaceful protests, but we will not tolerate lawlessness." And that was also the message coming from Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf tonight. And I think at this point, that's really the hope, is that things are going to stay peaceful and there would be minimal damage to businesses in downtown Oakland and in San Jose, although we know that San Jose City Hall was spray painted and vandalized as well in tonight's protests. Mark, any final thoughts that you can leave us with before we let you go, just about these crowds and whether or not you anticipate this could possibly get worse?
Well, there's certainly a potential that it could. I mean, that is going to be dependent upon certainly the protesters. And the difficult part that comes into play are the agitators that come solely not because they're protesting the cause, but their role in that is to agitate the crowd. Don't understand quite why you'd want to do that, but we know that that is something that happens periodically. And you've got those who are taking advantage of the situation in terms of looting. So it's almost like a three-process approach in how you have to deal with that, and we recognize it. But the police officers are very much trained in that. They're keeping an eye on those crowds. They've got unique tools to be able to try and ferret out who's who in that group. They want to be as respectful as possible. In terms of your question, outlook, I think we've got a few more days before this is all going to be over.
Mark, I did want to ask you a quick question. I know you have to go, but I wanted to ask you this. Oakland Police, they have reported multiple officers injured at 7th and Broadway, and they've also declared unlawful assembly declared here. Can you talk a little bit about what all of that means, and is that what we're seeing when police are pushing these folks out of the area when they declare unlawful assembly?
Yeah, well, certainly, our thoughts go to those officers that we don't want protesters or officers hurt by any means. And when that happens, it starts to ratchet up the whole process operationally. And so in this particular case, OPD, I'm sure they've had conversations with California Highway Patrol and other adjoining cities to send resources if need be. They're probably already integrated into the police department. You may not see them on the front lines, but you can see them in backup roles and more if necessary, so their mutual aid plan will kind of kick in here. In terms of the crowd and controlling the crowd in this particular situation, it's going to be to stay with the tactics that they've learned, how to disperse, how to handle crowds, how not to ratchet it up if at all possible. But if it becomes something where it becomes unruly, then the police officers are going to have to be more aggressive to make sure they take control and they don't lose control of the city. That will be the challenge as they move forward here, is to understand frustration, work with it, be respectful, don't get baited into it, stay with your plan, and just let people vent. You got to let them vent.
Well, in this particular case here, it looks like something is on fire. I can't tell. It looks like it could possibly be a garbage can next to a bus stop right in the downtown Oakland area. And as I just mentioned before, a few moments ago with you, Mark, that police are notifying the crowd at 7th and Broadway that the demonstration is now unlawful assembly. And as I said before, multiple officers, OPD says, were injured by projectiles that were thrown at them. And they're requesting people to leave that area right now. But it doesn't look like that is happening at the moment. But police are definitely there holding the folks at bay from getting closer to the police department, as we saw just a few minutes ago. And now we see what appears to be a fire next to a bus stop and what looked to me like a trash can, from what I can tell from my vantage point from being down in that area. And now
Andre,
go ahead, Mark.
To answer your question, I'm sorry I didn't totally answer that. When they designate unlawful assembly, that's the authority that allows them to disperse the crowd. In the beginning, it's listening, it's movement, it's making sure that they're protecting property. Unlawful is now they've got the authority to try and disperse that crowd, be a little bit more aggressive to get that crowd to disperse. That's the idea behind the authority of declaration of that.
Mark, we appreciate your time and coming on. We're going to check in with you in a little bit if we need to, but we always appreciate your perspective here on issues like this, especially when it comes to public safety. Mark Naveau, thank you. And just to recap here, this is the culmination of the day's events from protests that started earlier today in San Jose and are now continuing into the night in Oakland in response to the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And all of this comes on the same day that an officer has now been charged in his death, is in custody from what we understand. Derek Chauvin is the officer in question that was seen on video holding his knee over George Floyd's neck and holding him down for 8 minutes, and that eventually led to George Floyd's death. We have seen protests spark in Minnesota and things turn violent. We've seen vandalism. We've seen police that have engaged with protesters, and in Minnesota, we've seen fires that have started here. And in the Bay Area, we've seen smaller fires. As Andre had mentioned earlier, there was a small fire that appeared to be set in downtown Oakland. Not quite sure if that was a dumpster fire or what that was, but nothing compared to what we have seen in Minneapolis. So our crowds here are large, but for the most part have remained peaceful, although we, of course, are trying to look into the fact that those officers from Oakland have been injured. It's not clear the nature of their injuries. We're not sure if they've been taken to a hospital or if they were treated on scene by medics. But at this point, we know that it's likely several arrests have been made, and how many is still unclear because the night is still young and unfolding, and we keep watching these protesters make their way to different parts of downtown Oakland with random tear gas or fireworks being shot off into the crowd. And it just again goes back to the fact of city officials and police officers just pleading with people that they want things to remain peaceful tonight. They understand the plight, they understand their frustrations, and they want to stand in solidarity with them, but they really want to keep things peaceful here.
All right, we saw earlier today in San Jose when we were showing you those pictures that the San Jose Police Department, they were out there in force, but they also got some aid from the Sheriff's Department down there. So it's a similar situation. That's what's happening right here, right now. Oakland police are out there, but they're also getting some support. So we're joined now on the phone by Sergeant Ray Kelly with Alameda County Sheriff's Office. Sergeant Kelly, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good evening.
So we understand that you all are providing some mutual aid here to the Oakland Police Department. Can you describe what that is and how you're doing that?
Well, the Alameda County Sheriff is the mutual aid coordinator for the entire Bay Area. So we provide mutual aid not just for our county, but all the Bay Area counties. So right now we're going to bring in some extra officers to Oakland to help out with the situation. I think you can see that the tempo of the situation has changed a little bit since earlier this evening.
Sergeant Kelly, I know that when we talk about situations like this and we talk about planning for protests, a lot of times you don't want to say the strategy that goes into it because that's for officer safety. But can you at least say if any type of plans changed in response to tonight because